Welcome to App Talk with Upptic, where we dig into the nitty-gritty of how to grow apps and games. We speak with industry experts about specific strategies, tools, and tactics they use to find success, and we keep you up to date with emerging news and trends in the ever-changing games, marketing, and technology ecosystem. My name is Xander Agosta, Director of Marketing here at Upptic, and joining me today are my co-host,
Warren Woodward, co-founder of Upptic.
And we have two guests this week. Whoever wants to go first, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Poof, one of the co-founders of EtherOrcs.
And our other guest.
And I'm Beef. I almost said my real name. I'm Beef. I am the game designer of EtherOrcs currently, and also run socials.
Nice.
Awesome. Super hyped to have you guys on the podcast. Like I was mentioning right before we started, EtherOrcs was one of my early Web3 gaming projects and one of the ones I followed super closely over time. So probably going to nerd out with you guys more than normal, and really want to highlight the different path to market that EtherOrcs has taken from like different games in the space. So yeah, going to go deep with you guys today and looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Sick.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
And we can jump to this later, but also maybe pioneering the free to own gameplay, or definitely ahead of the curve.
We
there.
could
definitely
we could go in on that on free to own, and like I know Poof is really bought into it, but like I'm more about like just the own. I don't think we're at the free yet. Yeah. But I don't think we can get there.
We'll get there. We'll get there. All right.
Let's dig in.
Foreshadow. Our first section is industry insights, where we do dive in industry news. We've got one of the top that Warren's gonna cover, and then several Xander rants about Apple. So we'll get to those shortly. Warren, do you want to start?
Yeah, for sure. So we want to start with just sort of an update on the Reddit NFT situation. We covered this when it first came out. So we're going to link to an article from blockworks.co. This is a few days out of date, but just for a quick pull quote, social platform Reddit has been silently rolling out new features and onboarding millions of new users to Web3. Nearly 3 million new wallets have been opened since the Reddit Floor Marketplace launched and dropped its own avatars in July. Users have minted more than 86,000 NFTs. And side note, I'm seeing really weird numbers on this. Maybe you guys have some insights, but I checked more recent numbers on OpenSea. It looks like there's now about 3 million Reddit NFTs minted. So I'm curious if a lot of that is just like in the last week or so. And then one other data point, Reddit NFTs have collectively hit a peak of around $122 million market cap. Today, it's around 80 million, according to that same Reddit Floor Marketplace data. So Beef, Poof, I would love to know if you guys have been watching the activity of like the Reddit NFT launch. I know it's kind of taken a lot of the oxygen in the space in discussions on crypto Twitter and elsewhere. But what do you guys make of this phenomenon? Is it a flash in the pan? Is it actually onboarding new people to Web3? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll start because I've been like obsessive on it, and then Beef can probably talk more from like the EtherOrcs specific perspective, because he was actually ahead of the curve and tried to go get an EtherOrcs Reddit going really early that our community like was kind of into, and then like it's kind of develops. But anyways, I think on the because like I'm always I don't know, I'm like in my background I'm a heavy kind of like analytics, but using it to drive like commercial decisions kind of background. So I'm always looking at the market and what's going on and how many users are in NFTs and other stuff. I think the facts around Reddit, people are getting confused. Like, so and we also like, I did a bunch of like kind of anthropological work of like, hey, let's just go talk to people who are on Reddit, who don't have any exposure to NFTs, who ended up like having an NFT that was valuable and going through the process to come into MetaMask and everything. And basically like the 3 million are people who purchased through Reddit's kind of centralized wallet system. Right. In NFT. So those are like 3 million real NFTs. The 80,000 is like the number of those people who then went on to go take it off of that and into their own wallet on MetaMask or something like that. So
that makes sense. And that's really fascinating in and of itself, right? It just shows so many people are just holding on to that NFT. But yeah, please continue, Poof. Yeah, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, so like I think that is like people were kind of dismissing that, like, oh, it's not 3 million, but like if it was 3 million, that would be a game changer. Like I don't know what people's expectations are. It's not gonna be 3 million because we have like 1 million people in NFTs, ETH NFTs right now. But like 80,000 people, which is a really good conversion rate off of your 3 million, is like awesome in terms of they went all the steps. And then talking to the people, they had like a weird, complicated journey too to actually get from the 3 million to the 80,000. Like, because they were figuring out how to go from set up their first wallet, take the asset from Polygon, bring it over. In some cases, if they had interest in buying more, buying ETH on Polygon, or figuring out a way to go bridge it and go through that full process onto Polygon. And then their first experience was on a side chain. So like what was interesting, just, and this is more like anecdotal, the one person I was talking to, like after that, he was like, oh, I really am kind of interested in NFTs and all this other stuff. And like, instead of going to L1 and ETH, he like ended up going into Arbitrum randomly. But it kind of makes sense because like
speed running Web3.
Yeah, it's just like going right in deep. So it's super interesting. So I think it's great. I think it's awesome. I think people's expectations for it are probably out of line. But like, it's stuff like this that will slowly over time kind of go bring in on board people, I think.
Yeah, Beef, before going to you, one follow-up question for you, Poof, because I do appreciate you surface a lot of good data on adoption trends, on NFT marketplace activity. What do you have a go-to number you reference for current active wallets? Because I see such disparate numbers, different places. We've been quoting like 60K to 100K if you set Axie aside, because Axie is on its own, you know, its own chain, and kind of a lot of those players only play Axie. But what numbers do you guys reference?
Yeah, I just look at, you know, in this year, how many total wallets on ETH, L1 or a L2 or sidechain have done 2 or more NFT transactions in the year. So this is like not daily active users, it's not daily active wallets, anything like that. It's just like how many total people have done at least 2 NFT transactions, excluding mints and everything else, and then excluding like some like noise and other stuff on any of the marketplaces. It's like 1 million.
Got it. Cool. Beef, what's your take on Reddit?
Oh, I am a Reddit OG. I got the 9 to 10 year badge. I actually minted the first the run. They actually hit me up with like the pre-mint so they did like this first like testing run, right? So I got the mint. I had like 10K karma at the time on my OG account. So I got the mint, like this meme team thing, super seamless. It was great. I didn't have to interact. It didn't feel like I was interacting with the blockchain. I love that. And then they set up a wallet for me. They gave me a seed phrase, and then I entered that in, and you know, it felt super seamless and like all the, so that's what I liked about it. And I think that's kind of like, you know, where we have to move as a whole in the space, is because like you don't want people interacting with MetaMask and like these horrible UIs and these experiences out the gate. So what Reddit did, and you know, like that initial wave was like 2 million. Because like when people were bringing up Reddit NFTs, I'm like, I'm not going to mint this for $25. So when I minted is worth 10 cents. So I'm like, I'm kind of over this. And then it blew up, and I like watched, and I'm like, you know, good for that. I'm happy that like more people are coming in. Some people made money, but like, yeah, I just like what Reddit's doing, kind of putting it all in a package, gift wrapping it, and then giving it to the user.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
go ahead, Xander.
Well, I was gonna say, I think you really highlighted the important part of this, which is like the Web3 experiences, which are going to go mainstream, are the ones that are seamless and painless. And we've been talking about this podcast, we've been talking about for over a year how painful the experience is in a lot of ways. And I'm like I'm reasonably techie, and I have a high interest in games. And like my experience with blockchains is still, it's like incredibly painful to the point where I tend to not do it as much as like say Warren does. And so the thing that's really going to start moving the needle is experiences like this, where it's just seamless. And then like you point out, that incredibly painful user journey still had an incredibly high conversion rate. So when you have the really seamless onboarding experience, there's clear that you can have a really powerful downstream effect.
Yeah, the anecdote I wanted to add was I put a test feeler out in another pocket of Reddit where I'm active, which is like the Magic the Gathering subreddit. And I know they all historically just like have the pitchforks out for NFTs, but I trolled them, and I posted like, hey, thought experiment, how would you guys all feel if for Magic Arena, all of your cards were tomorrow NFTs, but the pricing stayed the same and everything else stayed the same, but they're NFTs and you could trade them now. And my phone just started blowing up, and just like, screw you, F you, get your NFT scams out of here. just hate. And then my post was banned for like violating policy within about 5 minutes. So it's really interesting, like while this Reddit push is happening, just how there is still in the core like gamer segment that we all care about, there is still this like huge branding problem with NFTs and just an outright hatred from gamers.
Oh yeah, and I know we're gonna get into it later, but like I come from like a very, very indie, like that's, you know, where I kind of jumped in the Game Maker Studio and the people that I met early on in my like adult gaming journey. They fucking hate NFTs.
Yeah.
It is a putrid hatred. They do not want to hear anything about it. And it needs a complete rebranding as like a digital asset, a digi for Poof. But like, you know, they got a bad rap, and rightfully so for the most part, because like the last couple of years of NFTs have been kind of BS. So it's like, how can you expect them to have like a good representation on that side of like gaming? And then you have the people that are going foremost into the industry are these predatory game companies. Well, not predatory game companies, it's companies that gamers view as predatory. So that's the first thing they're seeing, right? So it's just bad correlations all around. So I cannot blame people for hating on a new tech that, you know, makes them react in that way.
The space has largely earned its bad reputation.
Yeah, I mean, like, and that's also one thing, like, as we were talking to people who are like onboarding into NFTs now, who are Redditors, who now are like part of it and they're new, like, it's shitty. It's hard to come in right now and like try and figure out what the hell is going on, just like from a pure experience standpoint. So even like the people that you do get to come over, I think they see the value in whatever, but like, it's not the greatest experience today when if you plopped in, if you're part of the 80,000, you're kind of like, oh boy. And you don't have like the cushion of the bull to go help you where it's just easier. Like right now it's kind of brutal. So
you basically need like a Sherpa. Warren's in my Sherpa.
No, you really do.
We do.
It's like, I remember my NFT journey was horrible. I have no idea why I stuck with it. Like I was just like minting and buying garbage for like the first month, and then, you know, it eventually worked out, but it took like perseverance, and I don't think a lot of people have that.
It's true. Well,
awesome.
we went pretty deep on that topic. I know we have several more stories we want to cover, but I knew you guys would have some good takes on that, and you did not disappoint. So Xander, I think you got a handful of Apple stories for us next, right?
Yeah. So I'll do a few of these Apple ones. This will tie back to NFTs at the end because it'll have Apple's policy, NFT policy, which has been updated, and we'll talk about that briefly. But I want to touch, for our more traditional mobile audience, I want to touch on a few other things that are really, I think, critical for anyone who's following the mobile space closely. So the number one is a mobile dev memo article entitled "Apple to Developers: Social Media Boosts Must Be IPs and Subject to Platform Fees." It's a nice little rhyme there. All right, here's a quote. Apple released iOS 16, and as part of that release, the company published 11 updates to its App Store guidelines. Among those changes is the new directive that requires developers to process advertising, promotional purchases that occur within consumer-facing apps, such as social media boosts, as in-app purchases, allowing Apple to extract platform fees from those transactions. So what this means, in a nutshell, is basically the policy is designed not for apps that are just meant to manage ads in total, but for consumer apps like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, those sort of apps, if a consumer boosts a post within those apps, Apple wants a cut. He wants a 30% cut, just like they're taking from everywhere else.
Or a small business, anyone who's not using like the hardcore like native ads platform.
Right, it's the consumer, anyone who's using the consumer product. So I guess any takes on this piece quickly. I'll kind of rattle through a few of these different article points.
At this point, you know, Apple's just like beating Facebook's corpse. It's like, it's dead already. Leave it alone. Like just little moves like this. Like even if you want to promote something through an app, like we're going to charge you, you know, on the way in of just like buying the ad space too. Like its overall impact, I think, is maybe overstated because it's largely smaller ad spends that are going through like the consumer app and boosted posts. But it's just, you know, beating Facebook's corpse right now.
I think it's also interesting. It's like, you know, Twitter's going to go through a lot of changes. They're gonna get ahead of that. TikTok, I imagine, has a fair amount of boosted posts. So I think it's really just positioning themselves to make sure they're continuing to capture upside from all of these different consumer platforms. So that's one piece. We'll sort of put that one aside. My thought is we'll get to my thoughts in a second. All right. So the next piece, I redid the order, but this next one is SK Ad Network 4.0 4.0 now available. This is an Apple official release, and a short. I just want to breeze over this quickly, but a little quote is SK Ad Network API lets advertisers measure the success of advertisements by attributing app installations to specific campaigns, all while maintaining user privacy. So basically, the new SK Ad Network framework has 4 new things. They have hierarchical source identifiers, a new course conversion value, multiple conversion values, SK Ad Network for web ads. So I'm not going to do a deep dive here. Anyone who's been following this podcast for a while basically knows that SK Ad Network is Apple's attempt to allow attribution for privacy compliant attribution, but basically it's not effective. And the new release of SK Ad Network 4.0 basically is doing more of the same, basically saying, hey, we're going to give you very nominal tools to allow you to do privacy compliant attribution, but in reality, this is basically a non-functional incremental improvement. So I guess, Warren, I'm sure you have thoughts about this.
Yeah, I'm curious for Poof and Beef, with your respective backgrounds, like how deep have you been in kind of the mobile games marketing ecosystem? How much have you been tracking kind of Apple's moves to be more privacy centric?
I have not. So I don't have a traditional mobile games background. I have more of a consumer products marketing commercial background. So I'm familiar with it on that end, on like the limitations on targeting and other stuff, but not as much in the like mobile app universe.
Yeah, and I'm more YouTube media. I've always been pretty aligned with Google for all my releases. I actually hate Apple as a general product company. I moved off their, I know this is funny, but I moved off, I've never owned an Apple phone. I moved off iMac after I finally left all my bigger media companies. And their message, I don't know. I don't want to go into it. This is not the time in the
No, it's all good. I think
gamer here. PC gamer hardcore.
Maybe then for both of you guys' benefit, and for any of our like newer listeners, or from those coming from outside the mobile games ecosystem, like just zoom out and quick refresh. Apple enacted these policies, what, about 18 months ago now, Xander?
Just about, yeah.
And the wide-reaching implications of Apple making these privacy changes to ad tracking have been just completely destructive for the mobile gaming ecosystem. It basically, my background is in paid performance marketing with a focus on mobile before I went deep into Web3. And essentially, they broke all of the infrastructure that had powered the adoption and marketing of iOS apps over the last decade. It was like, it's like the Thanos snap, and the whole industry just couldn't figure out how to measure any of their growth marketing on iOS, and it's had these massive implications. We've seen like huge closures of mobile game studios, massive layoffs. Every tech company whose revenue was driven by mobile advertising took huge hits, had massive layoffs. Including, it's probably the number one factor of why Facebook's stock is so depressed right now. Excuse me, Meta. It's not the metaverse money inferno. It's them losing their iOS growth in ads revenue from making this change. So what Apple did was basically kill all existing infrastructure in the name of privacy. But then they said, hey, don't worry, we have our own Apple like privacy friendly tracking system, but it's like solving a friggin' riddle to use it. No company has figured out how to use it well. It's been 1.5 years now. Our team at Upptic basically had to build our own software to like compensate for this and like model out like player revenue trends and return on ad spend because of what Apple broke. And just to cut to the end here, there's some improvements with SK Ad Network 4.0, the new version of this, but in our opinion, or at least in mine, it's still completely unusable as the standalone solution that Apple thinks it is. So we're going to still continue to see the iOS portion of the market burn and suffer and not know how to scale their games and not know how to measure things. And I think the destruction is still going to continue for at least a while now.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I guess any thoughts here? I'm gonna wrap this back, and it's gonna come back to NFTs, I promise, because guess what? There's more. There's a new App Store app. So this last article is App Store Review Guidelines Update now available from Apple Developer Portal. And guess what? It's about their NFT policy. Okay, coming full circle. Here's a quote. Apps may use, this is just one of their guidelines specifically as it pertains to their NFT policy. Quote, apps may use in-app purchases to sell or sell services related to non-fungible tokens, such as minting, listing, and transferring. Apps may allow users to view their own NFTs, provided the NFT ownership does not unlock features or functionality within the app. Apps may allow users to browse NFT collections owned by other players, provided that apps may not include buttons, external links, or other calls to action that direct consumers to purchase mechanisms other than in-app purchase. And as a clarification, I spoke to some insiders in the know that you are allowed to unlock functionality with NFTs, but only if you do it through the in-app purchase in Apple's platform. So as long as they get their pound of flesh and 30% cut. So, I mean, I think this is basically an absolute kneecapping of the open NFT system as it relates to mobile phones on the iOS side, and continuation of a digital oligarchy policy by Apple. There are companies who currently exist that are sort of circumventing this policy, and I'm really curious to see how Apple brings them in line over time, and if they're able to, or if, you know, to what extent they're able to, because I mean, they will do it to some extent. But I think that the number one thing that this just kind of bums me out is like they're just stifling innovation for like no particular reason. Like obviously this is not a huge segment that's driving a ton of revenue currently, and what they're basically saying is like, we're gonna have a fully locked down ecosystem. You have to use Apple ecosystem. You're not allowed to transfer anything else out. You're basically not allowed to do any of the cool things that you can do with blockchain and the NFTs in the iOS platform. They're basically taking completely the wrong stance on this from my perspective. And I think Apple is acting incredibly monopolistically. I think this is anti-competitive and bad for consumers. And I mean, Apple, I think, needs to be treated as monopoly by the government. And basically, the only way to fix this is government intervention. I mean, again, maybe over the longer history, consumerism someone will create a competitive product that goes around Apple. It seems very unlikely that happens in the short term due to how much lock-in they have, especially on the richest people in the world. So I'm a little bit bummed by this. I think really like if you take all these different components together, they're clearly acting as bad actors, right? The NFT piece, the scan piece, the IAP piece, they're doing anti-consumer behavior, that monopolistic behavior, which downstream will become anti-consumer. So I don't know if you guys have thoughts here about the policy. I mean, I imagine you guys do.
So let's maybe zoom out and kind of clarify. So, all right, let's say EtherOrcs is trying to come to mobile. This current policy is saying, yeah, all of those NFTs that are already in your collection, no one can use any of those, but you can sell new NFTs. It has to be done through in-app purchase, and those can be given functionality. That's kind of your current read of this, Xander?
That's exactly, yeah, and only those NFTs.
Apple taking 30% of each sale.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Sound
yeah,
pretty good, guys?
I think I actually, maybe it's a controversial opinion. And again, I haven't like worked extensively, but just listening to people like Gabe, but also like, you know, people like our lawyer, and others who are closer to this. I think one, I guess to me, one of the things that's been challenging about like leaning in, hey, we're a lean team, so we just do what we can based on the market we're trying to saturate at the time. So mobile is key and part of the roadmap, but not kind of like day one. One of the challenges though is like there's no explicit guidance from Apple on NFTs, which made it this kind of gray area where you weren't sure if you were going to get shut down or whatever. So like spending time and energy and resources against it always felt shaky until that was clarified. So actually, to me, it's actually good that they clarified it. And then everything else kind of fundamentally is just everything that everyone's been dealing with on the Apple App Store since the beginning, right? I mean, they have 30% fees for everything else. So not right or wrong, kind of agnostic of their business decisions. It's kind of in line with what I actually would have expected them to do. I think the NFT thing, it's unclear. It feels, I guess my interpretation of it, and I know like, you know, there aren't very many products to go test it with. My interpretation is more, or what I understand is more, they just want to make sure they have a cut of any transaction that happens relevant to the ecosystem that would be like, basically they just don't want someone to go make transactions that are buying something where we're profiting, that they're not getting their 30%, right? So as long as you're kind of satisfying that, I don't know if that's true that like all NFT purchases that are like on OpenSea, they want some cut and there can't be an unlock. I think it's more like, hey, if there's something related to the app, then there's an in-app opportunity for you to go buy a potion or use Zug Farm or whatever. They get 30% of whatever we're getting, right? Theoretically, is how I interpret it.
That's right. But the thing that also happens though is you can't transfer in NFTs from anywhere else. So right, they're basically saying you can do whatever you want wherever you want, but like anything that's going to happen within the iOS ecosystem has to come in through the front door. Which, I mean, I understand from Apple's perspective.
Is that true though? Is that true though? Like if you look at STEPN, right? It's not necessarily.
Well,
that's the point though. They're probably out of compliance. That's what I'm saying. If you read this new policy,
a lot of apps that are live today that are out of compliance.
And this is a brand new policy. This is like this came out last week.
I would push back there a little bit because, you know, we've been talking with the Apple team for now, I mean, close to a year around these policies, and like to Poof's point, like at least now there's public, like outward facing clarifying statements on what is and what isn't allowable. And most of this is in line with what we've heard in our conversations with them. Like they are engaging with the space. Like we've been able to get them to like, you know, sit down with us and some of the like Axie and some of the teams that we work with to actually like sit down in person, hash some of these things out. And at least it's like now there is outward fate. They're saying the word NFTs in their policies. And just like when free to play started, like it's going to evolve over time. This is like a blunt instrument form of policy, just shoehorning and to kind of like current Apple guidelines. But I think it will get more nuanced. They'll understand how to like adapt to a marketplace. You know, if I buy an NFT from Beef, that they shouldn't take 30% of that, but, you know, 30% of the 5% instead. These policies and infrastructure aren't really in place yet. So I'm not actually that panicked about it. I'm fairly optimistic that they're at least engaging and producing policy, and there's a dialogue happening now.
Yeah, because I think like if you're right, Xander, like, and they like you can't transfer in your orc or use your orc on the app, like I think that's bullshit. But I think there's like they'll probably get over that. If I'm them, I'm just putting myself in their shoes from like a pure business standpoint, and I'm some corporate dude just managing a P&L. I'm just gonna say I want to set expectations now that all NFT based products I'm gonna make 30% on. I'm not gonna make less, and that's mostly what I'm concerned about, so I'm going to write it as broad as possible. That's how I read it.
Yeah, well, I'm going to read the one sentence again. Apps may allow users to view their own NFTs, provided that the NFT ownership does not unlock features or functionality within the app. So, like, they're pretty explicit that you can't unlock. And to be clear, like, I do agree that this is what I expect Apple to do, and also this is in line with what they've done for the last 10 years since they've been doing the App Store. I'm just making the judgment call to say I think this is like bad for consumers, and I think someone needs to step in and do something about it. Now, are they going to? No, but I wish they would. I wish someone would.
I mean, the market will decide, right? It's like kind of how like, all right, so Art Gobblers came out yesterday, right? And they're trading at ridiculous amounts of money. Nobody's listing on OpenSea. You want to know why? OpenSea charges that 2.5 or 3% like marketplace fee. Nobody's listing on it anymore. OS looks like a ghost town for high-end NFTs because, you know, nobody wants to pay that royalty cut to the marketplace. Do you think anybody? Well, and it's also hard to compare to current NFT space to what we want the future state to be. But like, if the 30% becomes a normalized thing and NFTs are $1, but like, you know, out of like 20K and I'm flipping an art gobbler, like I'll just avoid Apple. And it's been shown within crypto that you can choose your path to whatever application that you want. And that's kind of the freedom that we've opened up, right? Like, I know Apple will be kind of like that big unlock for everybody when it eventually hits, when NFTs eventually hit. But like, I don't really see the point of being afraid of something currently that hasn't been fully fleshed out, and that I would say 99.9% of projects aren't even touching mobile capabilities yet on the App Store.
Yeah, well, I think we could continue to debate this back and forth. I do want to go on to the next topic, which is to do a deep dive into EtherOrcs. All I'll say is, I mean, I think from my perspective, I look at it from the gaming ecosystem first, and I just continue to get disappointed with their policies. And like, it makes sense. I mean, and if you take a look at their earnings versus every other tech company's earnings, they're the only one not getting demolished. And so like the strategy makes sense. It's just monopolistic behavior. And I'm not a huge fan. That's all.
I have a lot of opinions, but I want to talk about EtherOrcs.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so we're this huge monopolist. There's this huge
We own all the
company.
orcs on the blockchain.
Yeah,
Ether Apple.
we're going big. We're one of these big evil companies, just like Apple.
We're the Apple of orcs.
I'm parody. That was a parody.
Yeah, this is a joke.
Cool. Well, Warren, do you want to kick off with the first question?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard you guys' origin story, a few times now, but I mean, for the new folks where this might be their introduction to EtherOrcs, if you could give us, the kind of cliff notes on your personal backgrounds, what you're comfortable sharing, and I'd say the abridged version of the EtherOrcs origin story.
Poof should start it off because I actually didn't. I wasn't around on launch. I didn't come around until Christmas of last year. So Poof, you started off.
Yeah, and we can share how we hired you because you made really good memes. But
yeah, it's all memes.
But yeah, so we started October of last year, basically 3 people getting together in a Discord in like a non-fully formed project Discord, which was EtherOrcs. And we were getting each other really excited. We didn't know each other in real life at all, Wrangler and John. We were getting really excited about this idea of orcs, and we had just all played or minted. It wasn't Mouse Dev wouldn't consider it a game, but we'd all minted Anonymized and had a lot of fun through that process. I think we met on the Anonymized Discord and started stewing up like, hey, how would we go make this more of a game? And then basically, we just said, screw it, we're going to go build this thing. And we had sketched out, or I'd sketched out kind of like the game theory and how it would work. And you'd have these orcs and everyone kind of starts on even playing field and be totally free. And then people are kind of competing to either mint out the rest of the orcs or go collect gear and other stuff. And we also had like a vague sense of this broader ecosystem. But it was kind of like, it was basically an experiment. And from start to finish, we built the entire thing in like 10 days or maybe 2 weeks, something like that. And then we launched it and, innovated and did a bunch of new things along the way. Like there were really on-chain gains before this. Like for us at the time, fully on-chain was super important. So like all the art, the image rendering, the way that we did that was a little bit different and kind of innovative for the time. It's actually pretty easy to do now, if you think about it, if like now that people kind of know. But essentially everyone had a ton of fun. It was kind of like an art gobblers type of scenario, but on a really small scale and with no funding and for free. And we had no royalties. So for everyone wanting to go create the kind of no royalties debate, I'm open for questions anytime because we did have 0 royalties. We're like one of the few projects that actually did it for like the first 4,000 or 5,000 ETH, I want to say. And then, yeah, it was like a huge success. People like went crazy over it. It started like 5 ETH or something, which is crazy. And then kind of went down and it's kind of gone up and down and everything else. And then basically what we've done since then is kind of develop out like a real working game that has on-chain and off-chain components, but primarily on-chain. It's pretty complex, but it's, actually a fun, playable game that people enjoy the game theory and creating different builds and all this different stuff. So we kind of evolved it all since then.
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback. So yeah, like Poof said, like around, I think beginning of May, like Orcs shifted. It went from the mint game and now we're more of a traditional turn-based RPG. Tokens and NFTs, they play the role of all the in-game characters and items and the currency. You can think of it kind of like gems. There are 2 main models that we're currently running. So it's the dungeons where you level up your characters, you put on loot and gear, you go in, you fight, you get chests, you craft stronger items, repeat. That's kind of akin to like the Dragon Warrior Final Fantasy. And now we're kind of shifting to a more in-depth RPG style like Octopath Traveler and Shin Megami Tensei. So we're slowly growing in that direction. Our game loop is very akin to the Monster Hunter series where, you're just getting weapons to get stronger. That's a primary vehicle of like, strengthening. We're adding on to that, like every month or two we add like a new mechanic to make the game more in depth, because, you know, really when it came out, we view this as like an early access game on Steam, where so we're open to just like adding things and changing the meta and making the game better and more fleshed out and in depth, and something that like gamers would actually want to engage with. And we also have like a more passive option, you know, we call them raids. And this is just like for, you know, more crypto NFT people that don't really want to game. So they can just like stake their assets in our contract for 24 hours. They get like a loot return based on what they put in. So it kind of creates like the same smaller gameplay loop without the actual gameplay.
Yeah, like a simple time management sim.
Yep.
For lack of better description. And then Beef, you had a unique background as well too. My understanding, you like worked at Vice for a period of time, and then you came from the music world. Is that all correct?
Yeah, I went to school for music, and then I got into Vice working on oh man, I was like an intern, and then I got hired there. Worked there for 5 years. I left and went freelance, went and worked for ESPN, Complex, V-Files, Kotaku, Gizmodo. Like just, I did the kind of like digital media roundabout.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, then I got into NFTs like last year. And then I kind of like drifted around, started hanging out with the Orc guys around Christmas, started making a bunch of memes. And they were like, yo, you're funny. You want to like post on Twitter? And then and then I started posting on Twitter, and then we were coming up with like the game demo. Poof, do you remember this? We were like kind of going through like the beta, and I took all the beta footage, I recorded it all, and then I just was like, oh hey, here's like an intro, a story section, here's how we could flow from like combat. And like they're like, whoa, what does Beef know about game design and like how things can flow? What does Beef know about music? Maybe you should work with a composer. And it was just like, and then I ended up directing the entire soundtrack, and now I'm like really in the weeds with like adding systems and making the gameplay more like compelling.
Yeah, and it's incredible because like the funniest thing ever, again, to Beef's like very multi-talented, multifaceted person, and like an extreme self-challenger, where, or maybe team challenger, where if he's not seeing it get done, he does the toxic thing where he takes it on himself and does it. But
like, I learned the code. Yeah, I've learned solidity.
Like I was always the person to go do like the numbers and the design and the modeling and the code, like not the coding, but like some of the technical aspects of like, okay, here's how these moves and other things are going to work. And I'm not a game designer by background, but we kind of figured it out. But then there was like a time where I had to go have like a big conference. So I work in the consumer goods industry, or have for the past long period of time, and doing all kinds of modeling and LTV, almost a little bit similar to probably some of what you guys think about on Web2 or Web3 and games, but for consumer products, so things that people buy regularly. And also kind of the gritty commercial aspects of things too. So kind of a P&L owner type of mindset. But yeah, so it's funny, like there was one time where I think it was probably when I had to go to that huge conference for like 2 weeks or something.
In
I wasn't
June,
able to work on anything in June. And Beef just like learned how to do all the stuff and then made me like irrelevant for that. So now I'm the shit poster and the marketer. And I'm just kidding, we both are.
It worked out. Now that you're great on Twitter and everybody loves you.
Yeah, it's the best.
Yeah. Beef, I feel like I had a similar journey into the game space as you, but like slightly different timelines. But like my past life, I was like touring in punk bands on like small indie labels and doing like indie film and like music video production, stuff like that. So like crappy ways to pay the bills, as I say. But when I was talking to Poof the other day, I was saying like part of why I feel like I really identified with your project, I was like, these guys seem like this is like the punk rock version of Web3 game dev. Like it's like
I say that all the fucking time. It's just like this I think why I like it so much is like I grew up in the indie hardcore scene in Buffalo, New York. Yeah. And if you know anything about Buffalo, New York, it's just shithole. It's not totally. Shithole. I love Buffalo there. But yeah, but like all we had was like heavy metal. We had metal and hardcore. And then like I went to school, I played in a hardcore band, same thing, toured a little bit, and then went to Vice and like book shows and shit. Yeah. So yeah, like that same punk ethos of like get the fuck, like kind of just like get it done grassroots. Like that's so our vibe.
Yeah, and money is secondary, maybe even to a fault in your earlier phases.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Nice.
So taking a step back, you know, you guys are obviously super in the weeds on the Web3 side. You've been doing it for a while, and I want to talk about some of the things you may have done before everybody else. But first, I just want to take a step back. What's your appraisal of sort of the Web3 games ecosystem as a whole, as people who are very, very in the weeds there?
Yeah, I'll go first. Beef probably has an opinion. I'll try and be short because I normally ramble on. But like I guess two things. I guess one, like it's so nascent and so early. It like almost doesn't, it does exist, but it doesn't in some ways, because I think the bubble popped on like linear yield farming type stuff. Like, right. I mean, we all kind of lived through that, and it's not like people want to critique Axie or whatever. Like it just, they didn't really realize what was good. It was all so fast and everything growing. But like, so I think like that phase of things is done. I'm hoping the phase of like all of the theoretical AAA things that were supposed to come out, whether it's Pixelmon in the most extreme or like all the other like junky games that theoretically are going to come out. I hope all that just kind of dies off and we can move on. So I think my issue has always been like, there's some people who like I think the AAA and kind of like the expansive, like perfect games that are going to like bring on tons of people, like honestly, probably we as like the existing Web3 space will struggle to do that. It's someone who like a Gabe or someone else who's going to like really be able to unlock that because they understand how to go do it. They've got the scale and the capital and everything else. And then, or like maybe an Axie now that they're kind of rebuilding and everything else. And then the rest of the market hasn't like quite figured out. Like, I feel like you've got a lot of these like homegrown indie people who are like trying to go punch above their weight versus kind of what I'd recommend, which is more like what we're doing, which is just like, hey, we're going to go like do an experiment. It's working. Great. Okay, now I can go scale and I feel better about our aspirations and our focus. But I'm also not going to go try to go fight in a $200 million marketing budget type of environment either, right? Or actually probably 900 million if I'm looking at the broader market. I'm going to go kind of like focus on really understanding the tech and having the capability and the speed. So like, I feel like right now, everything is kind of like everyone's trying to do everything versus trying to go figure out their role and their focus on what they really want to accomplish. That makes sense.
Damn, man, you were like took my notes.
I read it. Yeah, you shouldn't have wrote your notes.
You read my notes. Oh man, because I kind of had this like same thing to say. Like, all right, for one, there's not enough players in the space. There's not enough gamers. There's not enough people that actually want to like engage with like game ecosystems. They just want to trade NFTs, right? Second thing, the thing I hear a lot about us and like that comes in like our kind of critique is like people are like, it's too nerdy, it's too complicated, it's like you need to be more general, you need to be more broad strokes, you need to be XYZ, right? And that is like coming from media, that is like, you do not hear that. Everyone is niche down, find your subgroup, grow within that subgroup, become huge, and then dominate after that. So hearing that like reverse, like that I've been hearing my whole life, and I know like that the niching down works and it's working for us currently, is like, you just have too many people listening to that rhetoric and going too broad and creating these like too generalized things that don't have anybody that actually likes them, that don't have vision, you know, and it's like just this compounding blah. There's nothing that I'm really like, wow, that I would download that on Steam. And I download everything on Steam, like everything. I download like 3 games a fucking week. And like, everybody's trying to be too general. Everybody's trying to get everybody. Just be a nerd and just live in that and get the nerds and like build your core community out from that and then become so huge that nobody can ignore you, which is kind of what we've done.
So I've kind of two minds on what you just said, Beef. And like from one perspective, like I've gamed my whole life. It's what I live for. Like all of the games I love the most are super nerdy, super complex. But then as a marketer, you know, and like the bigger games in our portfolio, like the biggest one we brought like 50 million players in the last year. Obviously different kind of game, different kind of audience. And like to me, I feel like the sweet spot is like, you can have infinite complexity, but do you have a hook and a clear point of entry? And I think that's sort of like the fair critique from that side. It's like, you don't want to dumb down the product, but like, I think you guys have witnessed this too. Like, if a project seems too intimidating, it can keep people from entering. And like, how do you take them on that journey to add complexity over time?
Yeah, and I think that has a lot to do with, like, I don't find EtherOrcs that complex from a game standpoint. I find it complex from a blockchain standpoint.
Yeah,
Right.
That's fair. Once you're playing the game, it's pretty intuitive.
Yeah,
it's just getting them to that point.
It's like I always differentiate between like what mission though am I even trying to accomplish, because I think that's the difference between like mainstream like Web 2 versus Web 3. And then there's some people who can kind of bridge the gap, like you guys or what you're doing, or Axie or like the Gabe. But for me, I'm never concerned about like a random person on the street playing EtherOrcs Genesis as it exists today. Now, at some point, we may develop a product that's geared towards that person, where I need to think in the 50 millions. But like, I'm thinking purely, there's a million people today who know what the product, who know how to even interact with it at all. So it's purely that million people. And then within that, they're more technically savvy. They know a lot more. They're more likely to be nerds and gamers and stuff, right? Blah, 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 blah. Okay, what fraction of them can I actually go get? And then I'm going to go focus there. So I think that like the level of complexity that you can have is higher in terms of the blockchain. In terms of like how the actual game works, yeah, it still has to be like relatively simple, relatively intuitive. But I always go back to like, as we've looked at it, the accessibility thing is like kind of important, especially for us. Like there's obviously things we could go do to enhance it, but like probably a lot of that is stuff that, hey, in the next generation of Orcs or another kind of game mode or something new or a different genre of game, that's where we're going to go collect those people. You know what I mean? Because I'm always challenged to go say, like with the people we have today, how do we go bring in those people versus having like that burden of like, I got to go onboard people to blockchain.
On that note, I thought it was super interesting, and I feel like I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because I feel like we're talking about this now. You guys stated, I forget where it was, but like you guys had a publicly stated goal that I think it was like the next 12 months you wanted to have an EtherOrcs asset in 1% of the active wallets. Was that what it was? I'm trying to remember. It was like 1% of some sub definition of the NFT.
Yeah, community. I think that's probably like that's like a shorter term goal, which basically to get to like 10,000 users, like 10,000 wallets, like with the game over the next 12 months. And then over the long term, like basically our goal is, hey, there's 10% of the market today that participates, has bought, cares about, has done something with any of these like NFT gaming assets. Again, excluding Axie, so kind of looking at ETH.
Yeah.
And we want actually like our true goal is probably, hey, I want to go be like 50% of that contingent. And I want to go maintain that as long as I possibly can, if not indefinitely, as there's growth. So that's kind of like our core focus over the next, like, let's call it 3 years. And that's actually where we kind of like the bear, because it lets us just go expand within kind of a static pool, because we really think about share and that kind of mindset.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, what I hear that is you're very clear in deciding who you are, who the game is for, and focusing on that and creating a product that's aligned with that. And that's like a really, really critical component of actually bringing a game to market in a way that's compelling, is just understanding who you are and who you aren't for. I mean, you're not trying to go to all the Call of Duty players in the world.
We're not Fortnite.
Yeah,
right?
You won't be, and that's fine.
And it's like, you see this example play out all the time in AAA, where like game developers and studios will try to branch into they'll sink millions into trying to branch into other genres that isn't them, and they just burn money and nobody plays. You look at Square Enix, known for Final Fantasy, known for great RPGs. They have like great side RPG studios that are pumping out good content. Where do they fail? They tried to make a Final Fantasy Battle Royale, nobody plays it. They tried to do the Tomb Raider reboot, nobody bought it. It's like, know who you are and execute on what you know.
Yeah, Final Fantasy PSP game is pretty good. That's why I don't know if anyone.
Well, on that note, so
it was
in
a bad
that
alert.
mission, I do want to talk like growth tactics a bit, because that's a lot of where we focus our work. You guys did something that I love, like the Web3 games in our portfolio. We, even though like my background is in, you know, paid user acquisition, very like data-driven marketing. For Web3, we are like hard against paid marketing as like a valid growth lever when you're going after the audience that you guys are going after with EtherOrcs. You know, in at least today in Web3, when people see an ad for something, they more associate it with a scam. And definitely for the games that we work with, we focus more on partnerships, social proof kinds of models. And you guys have done that in a really badass way with, you know, you had your first partner dungeon, or I don't know, what do you guys call them, like with CyberKongs. I'm wondering if you can just, for the listeners who might not be familiar with EtherOrcs, just describe what this initiative of these partnerships were, and also why you guys have chosen to, because it's very resource intensive, so why you guys have chosen to focus on that as a growth lever.
Well, the collab, so these are our kind of collabs, right? And like the way I like to say it is like we're redefining what collabs are in Web3. It's not just like we're allowing X community to mint our thing. We are bringing the entirety of a community and allowing them to play our game and interact in our game loops, and then also engage with our community in a unique way through like only the way that we can. You know, like we have an in-game marketplace. You can earn in-game items for free if you're a part of that community for a set amount of time, and then you can trade them with orcs. You can experience like the entire game loop in a very unique way. And then we're going to just continue to iterate on that, right? And what we saw when we did it, we saw like a 300% spike in users. You know, like the Kongs came out and they played the crap out of our game and they loved it, and they bought orc stuff and they hung out, you know, and like that's just great grassroots marketing. And now we're gonna do something even bigger with Digi, you know, and like this is kind of how we're attacking it, is with these in-game events, which are heavily based on mobile game in-game events. If you've ever played like a mobile game when they have a collab, like when I came up with the structure for like the general structure for the Kongs collab, I was just taking what I've been playing for years, and I was just like, why hasn't anybody done this? Why hasn't anybody just taken this thing that works, that players love in mobile games, and just use it in Web3? And it did take a lot. It took us a month and a half to get it out, to get all the assets in and everything, and create like 5 or 6 dungeons with all those enemies. But like it was worth it for us. And then that got the attention of like everybody in the space. And then that got us Gabe's attention. Now we're going to do the same thing that's even bigger with Digi. And it's going to be, you know, I'm just taking ideas that worked in Web 2 and that I've enjoyed in my life, and then bringing them to Orcs.
Yeah, I mean, what I love about that type of collaboration is it does the thing that I was kind of complaining that Apple is kneecapping at the top, which is it's doing something that's uniquely possible with Web3. And that's really freaking cool. And that's actually something that's compelling, that is a unique differentiator from Web3 game that you can't do in any other game. So, I mean, I think that's epic, and that's really sweet. You kind of gave me a nice transitionary period, though, which is you talked about Digi. Excited to hear about that, but also, what do you think about free to own? Want to talk about that a little bit, and how you guys have done that initially, and what that's transitioned into over time?
I mean, what does free to own even mean to you guys? Like, I'm having trouble. Like, is it something different from what EtherOrcs did? And yes or no, and why?
I think it's similar. That's why, like, I think generally Gabe and I and the team have gotten along really well. And like Digi is one of the collabs, because like everything he's doing is kind of stuff that we've been thinking about and doing and have been excited about. And I mean, free to own is just, you give people stuff for free, and it's a good experience, and it's an onboarding measure. I think we're on like 2 different spectrums of it, though. Because like if I think about, so if you think about EtherOrcs, we were free, completely free. We've never really sold anyone anything. In the future, free is like a component of, or like low cost entry and stuff like that is a component of how we think about it, but it's not as core to our ethos as everything else. It's more about, for us, it's always about, so I guess actually let me take a step back. I always hated play to earn, because I don't want people to focus on earning. It's the wrong mindset. It creates a bunch of yield farming. It creates a bunch of shitty behavior. I want to get out of that. We always just like play and own, but free to own might be kind of work for us as well as part of as a moniker, because it's basically what we did. But I think what's cool about what Gabe's doing is he's doing it, like I always think about us and Digi and Limit Break on like opposite ends. Like Digi has the actual ability and scale and marketing experience to actually go after the mainstream community, like true mainstream players, and people in general, and start to go bring them in. And then at the same time, he fully understands and they fully understand like the power of interoperability, and their structure for how to think about interoperability, I think, is much, much better than how others have thought about it. So it's not just some asset that like one person owns that lets me go play a bajillion games. It's actually creating these additional, like the Castaways Pass or whatever it is, that, you know, you don't necessarily need to own a Digi to go participate in. But yeah, so I feel like it's kind of the same thing. I'm pro free to own, because I think like one thing, if you just take a step back, like everyone's talking about royalties and stuff because it's like a stupid marketplace death spiral conversation where they try to outbid each other by being the cheapest. But like the number one flaw or challenging thing in the space is like extractive mints. Like that was what destroyed all the liquidity in the space and made the bear market worse than it could have been otherwise, because like every project just sucked money out of the space. So that, like, to me is the big challenge. So I think like having free to own as the moniker is a good way to go disrupt that, to say like, hey, screw you, I can create a lot of value without a 2.5 ETH mint or a 3 ETH mint kind of thing. So I think that's actually really important too, to go like remember that it wasn't that long ago. Like if people are having like a 0.1 ETH mint or whatever, and it's like a real product and they're a proven team, like that's fine. It's more, there was so much extraction happening before. I mean, Pixelmon is a really extreme example of it. But there was tons of that going on. So I think what's awesome to see is like, hey, let's just go focus on free shit for people, go expand it and grow it.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Warren, do you want to, I know you have a question here about fundraising. Do you want to sort of dig into that?
Yeah, for sure. And you know, we're about at time. I think we're going to cut out our app of the week segment because I just want to ask you guys a couple more quick questions and might be more interesting. So sorry if you had a good app.
No worries.
But yeah, I'm just, so, you know, you guys had a very unique path to market with being like literally no initial revenue plan, at least something publicly available. I guess it's a two-part question. Like, firstly, you know, we see like there's basically two paths to market for Web3 games we see. One is the big VC fundraise, and the other is having, you know, a huge NFT sale up front. This model we're seeing a little less of in the bear market, but, you know, self-funding through an NFT sale. You know, why did you guys, you know, do you guys think that there's a valid third path? Obviously, like EtherOrcs is proof that there is a path, but like what would you suggest to indie game dev teams that are maybe turned off by doing the VC fundraise or selling assets for a couple $1,000s to bootstrap their project to NFT collectors? Like, what do you think that indie path looks like, you know, learning what you guys have learned on your journey so far? I know that's a big question, but you know, if you were advising some like young indie dev team today, like, you know, what recommendations would you give them?
Free to own. But no, I think it's interesting because like there's a lot of things that we did that were too extreme. And again, it makes me laugh that everyone's like, oh, you could be like no royalties and hold back some stuff. I'm like, yeah, but who's done that? Like, it's literally us and Anonymized, I think, who did that. So we went like really extreme. We were like, we're not going to take any money. We're just going to do this. So that was like too much. But I think low cost free mint at the beginning is good. Like, unless you really have a ton of experience and it's really clear like that you can go deliver on it and you're not just going to keep people waiting. Like, I feel like it is, or basically my problem typically with paid mints is like the expectations too are totally off in terms of like the expectations that are set to the team. So anyways, it's not that free is the only way, but it's just, you know, it can get extractive. So I think that's where a lot of people see the challenges with that kind of raise. And then obviously there's VC, which I don't think there's anything wrong with. Like at this, like as we go evolve, it's not something that like we're totally like, oh no, we're never going to do or whatever. But like it's something that, you know, there's different choices to be made. I think it's possible to go live off of royalties and everything else, but it's hard. I think what's interesting though, and this goes back to, we have these conversations all the time because I really like art, Beef really likes art. We really like thinking about like small indie artists and stuff like that. And we're kind of this weird indie hybrid, who knows what. But like, I guess what's easy to forget, and this is probably for like, if I'm thinking about someone who's in Web 2 and is an indie game dev, like a lot of these people like have $0. Like we take for granted like the amount of money, but like, and hey, for us, like we're more of a business now. We're trying to go think about how to keep people going and kind of be really fast and scrappy and still be leading and everything else. So we're thinking about that a lot. But like for the indie, like passionate just creators, like a lot of them are just doing it for like, no money or like tens of thousands of dollars.
Like nothing, nothing. They keep going and going and making games. It's because true, like real indie developers, that indie scene, the guys that do game jam, the guys and girls and people that do game jams, it's like that. That's why I think EtherOrcs works, right? It's because we're all passionate. Everybody on the team is freaking passionate. Like I love games. I love designing. I work until 11 o'clock at night on my own free time, just like looking at spreadsheets and working on things. Indie game devs love making games. And it's like, they're working with no funding. Like Stardew Valley didn't have any funding. That was an 18-year-old kid that worked for 2 years at like through college, like making the greatest indie game of all time.
Right.
And it's just like the dissociation between the NFT space and what creates value and what actually creates value in the indie game scene is so far apart in like how people think about like what's a good game, who's making these games, like how do you make a game. It's just like the best games aren't made by economists. And then oh god, I could just go off on this because people tell us to get economists all the time, and it's just like, guys,
get an economist.
But like, do you think like all of these, oh my god, it just like hurts my head because it's just like game economies and all of like this grandiose stuff is like handled by people who are working for nothing and doing their own thing for the first time. And it's just like, then you got like teams like, I don't know if you guys ever played this game called Dead Cells. It's like this indie team, and they've been building the same freaking indie game for like 6 years on like no funding from anybody, just selling their game for cheap, selling DLCs for cheap, and they just keep updating and going and going. And what the NFT space doesn't understand inherently is that's not all about money for some people. It's about just like making art, making games, making things that they love.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with all that, except for the best indie game of all time is obviously Braid. But except from that, I
Beef, I feel like that was such a perfect rant to end on, and it was really why I wanted to feature you guys on our podcast, because we really sit at this intersection where like half the conversations I have these days are with Web3 teams and half are with these traditional gaming teams. And I want people to realize there's not a lot of them, but there are teams out there that are building games purely out of passion and fun first, and really just kind of wave a flag and say like cool people in like indie game devs, passionate game designers, like come build in Web3. Like there's these really cool Lego pieces here that you can do cool shit with that you can't do in traditional game design. And we're not all crypto bros that that you don't want to hang out with. So it's been a great opportunity to feature you guys. Yeah, I don't know, Xander, any closing thoughts or questions from your end?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really interesting, and I mean, I think maybe one of our more niche topics on the Web3 space, which I definitely appreciate that we may alienate some of our audience or maybe attract a new one. But yeah, I think really interesting stuff that you guys are working on. If anyone wants to get a hold of either of you or play EtherOrcs, where can they do that?
Well, we're both on Twitter and very annoying. I'm under B33F ETH, and then Poof. What's your name? You're just Poof ETH, right?
Poof _ ETH. Yep. And I'm very annoying out there. So if you're part of Web3, you might.
And then if you want to get in the EtherOrcs, go to zughead.com. We have like our own Wowhead that is community made. And then we've got our YouTube channel, which has like a beginner's playlist, which is like a great like way to just like figure out the history of EtherOrcs and like learn a little bits of the ins and outs. And the EtherOrcs Twitter is, posting stuff every day. So yeah.
And I'll add a super helpful Discord community. It's like it's a cool place to hang out. and super helpful if you're new to the space or new to the game. Like lots of people will trip over each other to try to help you get started there.
Well,
There
yeah,
is-
and it's weird, right? It's like it's the only Discord I feel like that's like talking about a game over like floor price.
So here's the big question, and then we'll wrap up. So Xander, you have at least one orc, I know. Have we convinced you to go play the game on this podcast?
That was literally what I was going to say next. Is I'm going to go to the YouTube channel and watch the videos and actually finally do it. So,
okay, cool.
Get into Discord, Xander.
I'm in Discord too. I just like it's too many Discords. I can't follow them all, but I'll hit you guys up in Discord.
Otherwise, Poof is going to start calling you a coward on Twitter. I've seen that's his primary conversion tactic.
Well, I followed them both. So
Find someone he wants to play and repeatedly call them a coward until they start.
It was mostly Otto that I was doing it to.
It worked.
I gave him Orcs, and then finally it worked. And then he is like the most annoying player ever. He like sends me messages. Hey, how do I do this? Hey, I need more Zug. Hey, I need more. It's awesome. So he got me.
For those who don't know, Otto is a big like Web3 gaming influencer who, for some reason, for the last year, has talked about every go to zero gaming project, but has never.
He's awesome, and he's like
property.
a true gamer. Like loves games and like is very deep into gaming. So it's awesome. He's been a great supporter, but it's so funny. He wanted to play, and then he finally did.
Yeah, now he's actually playing like every other day. I see he's posting his rewards on Twitter. I love it.
Epic. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Warren, do you want to take us out?
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. This was really a pleasure. One of my most fun episodes that we've got to do in a while. And if anyone wants to know who we are the team at Upptic. At Upptic, we do all things to help games grow, both traditional games and Web3 games. So we handle the paid user acquisition, the kind of organic partnerships-driven Web3 native marketing. We have our own analytics and predictive data modeling platform for all of your data science needs, and we develop all of the creative to do all this stuff. So very cross-disciplinary team, kind of half people, half tech, and we bolt on and help you do all the stuff to grow your game. So if that sounds interesting, we love to meet game teams and just like learn what their problems are, see if we can help. And you can learn more about us at upptic.com. That's upptic.com.
Talk soon.